Well, the back-to-back world champion LA Dodgers got even better this week, signing the best closer on the free agent market, that being Edwin Diaz, to a reported 3-year, $69 million deal. This according to ESPN's Jeff Passan. This would set an average annual value record for a relief pitcher. And according to reports, the Dodgers could make even more moves to bolster their squad. So to chat this and everything else happening over at the winter meetings, let's bring in our friend of the show, Paul Hembekides, producer for ESPN's Get Up. He's also a contributor to the Baseball Tonight podcast as well. So how did the Dodgers sign Edwin Diaz?
Somewhat surprisingly. Now, none of us are surprised that the Dodgers go to the very top of the market to fill the one and only hole or need that they have on their roster, considering they just went back-to-back, are going to have a meaningful chance to three-peat, as you well know. But I do think a lot of people across the industry, at least those with whom I've spoken, are somewhat surprised that the Mets weren't able to get this across the finish line themselves. I mean, Devin Williams not only is a favorite of the fans there, but he's a favorite of the owner. And when those trumpets blare in Queens, it's the kind of thing that really rallies the troops, for lack of a better term. And those are the kinds of things qualitatively that do matter to Steve Cohen and do matter to the fans out there. And so the fact that it was not so different than the Devin Williams contract that they had given out just a week or so before was somewhat surprising. Perhaps his relationship with the organization wasn't as strong as we may have thought. Perhaps getting rid of pitching coach Jeremy Hefner was not a move that he liked. And we know that his brother Alexis pitched with the Dodgers for a short time and spoke glowingly about his time with the organization. So ultimately, they got the very best guy in the market, and there's a meaningful chance that Edwin Diaz is going to throw the very last pitch of the 2026 season.
I mean, yeah, that's so crazy to even say that. And so how is he even going to fit in this bullpen, given the fact that the Dodgers seem like they were pretty invested in Roki Sasaki, who had a really good rookie campaign for the Dodgers? Who's going to close for this team? Is it going to be Diaz?
It's going to be Diaz, but it is the right question to ask considering how dominant Sasaki just was in the postseason. Look, Roki Sasaki came over with the promise of being a starter. Him becoming a dominant back-end piece like he was last year didn't exactly happen by accident, but it certainly wasn't their first choice. Now, keep in mind that Tanner Scott signed a 4-year, $72 million contract. He's a lefty, of course, in that rotation, and he's awfully good himself. And so he had a very ordinary year one of 4 that they signed him to, but they're going to go Scott and Diaz at the back end of that bullpen, and I think be even more dominant than they were a year ago. Keep in mind, this is a club that has at least floated. We've at least heard rumors that Tyler Glasnow might be someone they might consider trading. So I could see them rearranging the deck chairs, for lack of a better term. But what is clear is that they have the 8th and 9th innings figured out to a much larger degree than they had last season. And this is a Dodgers team that 2 years ago won the championship with having almost no representation from a starting standpoint. And last year did so without much of a bullpen. So we actually might be heading in a year in which the Dodgers are a more complete team, a roster with fewer holes than they were in either of the last 2 years in which they took home the trophy both times.
Which is crazy to think about, and it also even crazy the Dodgers might not even be done. There's reports that the Dodgers are interested in Kyle Tucker, who's the #1 free agent right now. Obviously, they're one of the teams always mentioned with Tarik Skubal if he gets traded from the Tigers. I mean, do you think the Dodgers add 2 of the biggest pieces here, or at least one of these 2 names?
So the Dodgers are going to be in the conversation for both players. If Kyle Tucker's market comes to them, which is to say, if Kyle Tucker's market rhymes with what Freddie Freeman's did once upon a time when he in Atlanta couldn't reach the finish line, the Dodgers are more than happy to swoop in and sign, in his case, a first ballot Hall of Famer to a 6-year, $162 million contract, and that has obviously more than paid for itself. Now, from the perspective of Kyle Tucker's sweepstakes, it seems to me that everyone views this as a Blue Jays or the field. But it's not obvious to me that there's a big field. Kyle Tucker is not someone that the Yankees seem to be that hot on, or the Red Sox, or even going back to the Cubs, or the Padres, obviously, who are shedding, or the Phillies, now that they've brought Schwarber back. So a lot of the obvious Kyle Tucker teams, well, you know as well as I do, don't seem so obvious anymore. And so if the Toronto Blue Jays decide to pivot and pay Bo Bichette to come back, Kyle Tucker might be sort of up a creek without a paddle, at which point the Dodgers come in riding their white horse and offer him a 2 or 3 year contract that enables him to blow the AAV record out of the water and hit free agency once the new CBA kicks in, which candidly might be advantageous for most players at the top of the market. So I think you might see these kind of 1+1 deals or 2 or 3 year deals that include opt-outs so that players and their agents have optionality once we have a lot more CBA clarity.
All right, let's talk about the CBA here for a moment because, I mean, we've talked about how during the World Series, all baseball owners allegedly were saying they wanted the Dodgers to win because it would just prove this point about how mighty that they are and that there needs to be a salary cap instituted in Major League Baseball, which interestingly, Dodgers manager Dave Roberts has now come out saying he's actually in favor for. With the signing of Diaz, and let's just say the Dodgers do get one of these two big guys in Skubal or Tucker, do you feel like that it's only going to make this conversation about the CBA and potential labor stoppage here and the Dodgers only going to get louder because of this?
Yes, you're 100% right. We have no choice but to live through this conversation for the next year. Look, if all they do is sign Edwin Diaz, it would be bad enough for the average fan of the Reds or the Pirates or the Twins. But if they do wind up netting Kyle Tucker or trading, God forbid, for Tarik Skubal, it will have felt like the Dodgers are cheating, of course. And you and I both know that they have a very sound infrastructure. They develop players as well as anybody, and they invest their money very shrewdly. And they also most definitely take advantage of that CBA loophole, which enables them to defer all sorts of money. All this to say, I don't think by any stretch of the imagination the Dodgers are ruining baseball or any such nonsense. But there is going to be a preponderance of fans around Major League Baseball that are going to cry every single time that team wins, and they're going to go into next season as a major favorite to win the championship.
Let's switch gears and let's talk about the Phillies. Big news for them, keeping manager Rob Thompson, but also keeping Kyle Schwarber on a 5-year, $150 million deal. Was there any chance that Schwarber left the Phillies? Was there anybody even interested in him?
No to your first question, yes to your second question. There was plenty of credible reporting that say that the Baltimore Orioles, of all teams, matched that 5-year, $150 million offer. We had also heard that the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Cincinnati Reds, and any number of other teams downstream not only were interested, but made very credible 9-figure offers to Kyle Schwarber, which from the perspective of a 33-year-old designated hitter is super rare. But I think it's a commentary on two different things. The first of which is the bat is so potent. And even though he's a designated hitter, teams recognize that right now in this run-scoring environment, having that kind of thump, the top or the middle of your order, is almost invaluable. And the second of which is Kyle Schwarber is as good, as revered, as collected as any clubhouse guy in the entire sport. Kyle Schwarber is a guy, one of the few guys in baseball that you're actually paying more than 100 cents on the dollar because of the person. And we live in a world, as you well know, that so many of these decision makers are running every decision they make through their internal modeling. Their internal modeling doesn't have a number for what Kyle Schwarber is worth qualitatively inside that clubhouse, but the Phillies were willing to overpay for their own player because he is the heartbeat of that club. And so that's a big reason why the Reds and the Pirates wanted him too, because from that perspective, he would be an enormous boon to their clubhouse from the perspective of veteran leadership and the cohesiveness that he draws together. He's one of the few players in baseball that you can say that about. Ultimately, he was never going to leave Philadelphia, and now he'll make his assault at 500 home runs in the Baseball Hall of Fame, where he's played the last 4 seasons.
Hembo, let's talk about other things happening at the winter meetings right now. Are there teams or players or sort of news headlines that you're sort of watching over the course of the next little while with the winter meetings?
Yeah, there are two. The first of which is the Tarik Skubal trade possibility, which you brought up in relation to the Dodgers a couple minutes ago. And I do think there is a good faith argument to be made that now is the right time for Scott Harris, the Tigers general manager, to deal Tarik Skubal, coming off of back-to-back American League Cy Young seasons, of back-to-back playoff appearances. But you know, as well as I do, his value will never be higher than it is right now. Coming off the seasons in which he's coming off, knowing full well that you are exceedingly unlikely to be able to afford a 10-year, $430 million contract, which is what I'm projecting for Tarik Skubal. And if you do know that you're not going to bring that guy back, now is your best chance to recoup that kind of value and run those trades through your models. The Tigers have an outstanding farm system in place already, and so you don't exactly have to trade Tarik Skubal for prospects, which we know won't exactly excite fans. You could trade Tarik Skubal to any number of teams and try to recruit present-day value of players with control. We've heard Jarren Duran be on the market. We have heard Ketel Marte be on the market. We have heard Byron Buxton be on the market, and Pablo Lopez, and any number of other guys, including guys in Miami. So Tarik Skubal could go almost anywhere if you're able to recoup present-day value. Those are just examples I'm providing. There are 3 or 4 teams that not only have the prospect capital, but also have the present-day big league players with control that you could actually justify to your fan base. Yes, Tarik Skubal is going to walk away, but a year from now, we'll have the same access to him in free agency as everybody else. And we don't have to take a step back. We're effectively replacing his WAR with the WAR combinations of other players. So I think, to me, he's number 1. And number 2 is Ketel Marte, the inarguable best second baseman all of baseball. I think we're going to see the Diamondbacks trade him, perhaps not this week, but certainly before opening day. And I think he's going to command a pretty penny, considering he is right now the best player one of the toughest positions to fill in the entire sport.
We'll end the segment here with you, Hembo, on the draft. The White Sox winning the MLB draft lottery, getting the #1 pick, given the fact that they had the second worst record in baseball. The Rockies, by the way, because of tanking rules, because they got 2 high picks over the last couple of years, they got the 10th pick in the draft. What do you think about this draft lineup here and the White Sox getting #1 here?
I'd love to nerd out, regarding this topic with you at some point, because I'm fascinated by the way in which Major League Baseball has overhauled this process. I think personally, at least, for the better. But the most important thing that needs to be said aloud is you need to remember the name Rock Shalowski. If you're not a ball knower, if you're not a college baseball watcher, he's the shortstop for the UCLA Bruins, and he is a surefire superstar. He is the kind of kid that you ask 100 scouts, and all 100 of them are going to return your text and say, I'm drafting that kid with the #1 overall pick. The kind of clout that Steven Strasburg had once upon a time. That's surefire a #1 overall pick. And considering the fact that the White Sox and their fans really needed some good news after a bunch of lean years, that's about as good a news as you could have gotten at the winter meetings. It's one thing to sign we'll call it mid-free agent, which they would have loved to have done, of course, but to obtain the #1 pick in the draft for a potential superstar shortstop, and I'm not willing to say that it's too early. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that it's a near lock that kid's going to be the #1 pick in the draft next summer, and he's going to be a foundational piece for the White Sox moving forward. You best believe.
Yeah, and of course the White Sox, as you mentioned, definitely need a big star, so that would be great for them. Our friend Paul Hembekides, of course, producer for ESPN's Get Up and contributor to the Baseball Tonight podcast. Hembo, always good stuff. Thank you so much, man, for joining us.
Later, friends.